Hey everybody, I'm Greg Sowell and this is Why Am I, a podcast where I talk to interesting people and try and trace a path to where they find themselves today. My guest this go around is Alex Hajjar. He's an interesting mix of traffic engineer and musician. It's always interesting to me when I see someone who is technical but also very artistic. He's also a host of a fantastic podcast called Social Animals that explores how people experience friendship in their lives and the stories that go along with it. He's got an awesome voice and an easy rapport with his guests. At any rate, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Alex. Alex Hajjar, thank you for joining me on the Why Am I podcast.
Oh, Greg, thank you for having me on. I'm interested to be here. And I really loved your episode with Rocky Powell. And yeah, she obviously she hooked us up. She's super cool. I love talking to her. And she came on my podcast and I trust her word. So that's why I got in touch. And yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Rock and roll. I love how right out of the gate you start name dropping. Let's see how it's going to be.
I have to. It's all about, that's the thing. So I know this isn't an advertisement really for mine, but my podcast is about friendship. And I love shouting out my friends. And I'll do it every chance. So
all right. Well, I'm going to save my gushing about your podcast for later because it will come up and I want it to flow in line because I don't, unlike yours, which is well curated and edited, I don't edit anything. I really just do audio cleanup, chop the beginning and end off, and what's in the show's in the show, man. So that's how it goes.
You know what? I respect that. And I feel like my life would be way easier if I did that. But sometimes it's just like I'm a little bit neurotic and I got to edit it. So,
and I respect it. And that's why your podcast is gaining in popularity and mine is, just pretty much the same all the time because you're actually putting time and effort into it. For me, it's hard enough just to find people and then convince them to come and talk to me. So I don't have any energy left after that. I'm done. But
fair play. It is tough.
Let's start in the normal fashion. So you and I are standing in line somewhere. I'm feeling like, because I did a little research on you, do a lot of transportation stuff. You and I are at the DMV. I don't know if you guys have the equivalent up there, but it's kind of this place where you go and you sit and you contemplate your decisions in life and why you find yourself here and how one day you may be liberated. So we're sitting there. Striking a conversation because they have terrible Wi-Fi, so we can't watch our videos like we want to. And we both forgot to put podcasts on our phone, which we both know would never actually happen. There's always podcasts on your phone. But
always, yeah.
I tell you who I am and a little bit about me, and now it's your turn to reciprocate, Alex. So who are you, bud?
Yeah, I'm Alex Hajjar. I'm like a Canadian dude. I'm 36, I think. And yeah. I mean, like you said, I do transportation stuff. It's funny you mentioned the DMV. So like we've heard about the DMV and we have something similar here. So we have the Ministry of Transportation. So sweet. I'm a public service worker and I work in planning, but I work in transportation specific area. So I sort of comment on planning proposals and development proposals and stuff like that for building, neighborhoods and commercial sites and things like that. That's what I do for my day job. And it's not the most exciting job.
Oh, it sounds sexy as hell. What are you talking about?
Right? Yeah, imagine. Like at a party, I am the life of the party.
I'm getting the vapors over here. Woo, slow down. Slow down.
Do you guys know about pavement markings or what? Yeah, so, but like I've played bass guitar for since I was in high school. I travel as much as I possibly can because I think it's the spice of life. And yeah, I just kind of like it's hard because the last 2 years obviously has been weird for everybody. So it's hard to, I've tried to work on myself and I've tried to be productive. But I don't know if I've done too many things that remind me of who I am in the last 2 years, just because we've been locked down for so long. In my city, we were one of the longest lockdown cities, in the world in terms of COVID. So it's been a lot of time with just myself and working from home and things like that. So But I'm starting to go out more now. I was out last night for a show, a concert that my friend was putting on, and getting back to normal, so to speak, is going to concerts, hearing music, being among other people, enjoying live shows and things like that. So musical, I guess. I'm passionate about food. I'm kind of geeky, I guess. I love like Doctor Who and Star Trek and sci-fi. I read a lot of sci-fi books, and I'm a big reader generally. I don't read fast. I just read a lot. I think that sums me up a bit.
Yeah, I would say that's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot about a single person. And I noticed you forgot to say that you're a podcaster.
I am a podcaster. Yeah.
I know we said it a second ago, but we hadn't met yet. Yeah. At that point, we hadn't met, so it didn't count.
Yeah, I feel like I've given you way more information than I would give someone if I was at a DMV. I wouldn't be like, I'm all this stuff. I'd be like, leave me alone. But
well, odds are they probably are looking at you funny and they smell like cabbage. So it's probably not the kind of person you want to have a conversation with.
You're probably right. Yeah. You're probably right.
Most likely. All right, man. Well, that's interesting. So you said that you were Canadian first. Why is that an important thing? If we're sitting at the DMV, shouldn't I assume you're Canadian because we're going to be in Canada?
I'm getting a new license. I'm moving away from Canada. Yeah, I don't know. It's a funny identity to have, especially now. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of protests at how Canada has a huge role in like colonialism and white supremacy and things like that. So we had for a handful of weeks we had a big trucker protest and stuff in Ottawa in our country's capital, and they were all waving flags and saying really, anti-vaccine rhetoric, anti-mandates rhetoric, and all this. So, you guys have all heard it as well and stuff. So, but they're waving Canadian flags, and alongside Canadian flags, for some reason, they've got, what's that flag? They use it down. Sorry, don't mean any offense. Sorry? The Confederate flag.
Right.
And alongside that, there's Trump flags, and there's "Don't Tread on Me" flags, and a couple people had swastikas. So
interesting.
It's
smorgasbord, a buffet of interesting things.
So and just personally, I try to respect Indigenous people and their history and things like that. Right. I try to read more about it. So it's difficult. It's difficult these days, I think, identifying as Canadian and being proud of the things you're supposed to, in quotes, be proud of. Like I see the flag now and I associate it with ignorance rather than any sort of national pride. And I mean, personally, I don't really like nationalism at all. I think it's kind of toxic. And I'll cite Anti-Flag for that. The band Anti-Flag is a punk band from back in the day. And they sort of influenced me into the whole global community and things like that. But I think I'm getting off track here. I'm thankful that I exist in Canada, but I don't think this is the center of the universe. And I think people lose track here sometimes, and they think that this is the only place. Like, we have universal health care. We're not the only country that has it. We have one of the best qualities of life, and it's like, so do a lot of other countries, So I think sometimes there's a pressure to stay here, and in my experience, I have moved abroad, and I think that other places are equally good to live in or better. So even though I'm thankful to be Canadian and I'm thankful to live here, it's not necessarily the best place in the world. But I do like to make that distinction, I guess, because when I went to live in England, I would, meet new people. We didn't have family or friends there. We just moved there on our own. By ourselves. So when I would meet people, their first assumption, because of my accent, is, oh, you're American. And so your gut reaction, you're like, no. Right? Because I think like an American, conversely, if they were like, oh, are you Canadian? They'd be like, no, I'm American. Right. So we have the same knee-jerk reaction. We're just like, no, because you don't want to be confused by it either for whatever reason. But it would happen all the time. So the thing is, like, I'm Canadian. I'm Canadian. And they would always try and save face. They were like, oh, yeah, I could tell you're a lot quieter. And I was like, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but okay. So anyways, yeah, it's important to me, I guess, that, I was born here and that I've been lucky enough to exist in a place that does have, for now, things like, universal health care and other sort of like good bennies for living here.
Yeah. I had a little story about being accused of being Canadian, and it was more than once. And it was when my wife and I went to Australia for a couple of weeks for a friend of mine's wedding. Pretty much everybody we ran into kept asking us, are you Canadian? Are you Canadian? And after like the fourth time, I was like, I don't sound anything like a Canadian. Like, obviously, like, it's here we can tell pretty distinctly. And I was like, well, what makes you think I'm Canadian? They said, oh, it's because you're so polite. I was like, oh. So
it's nice for us to hear.
Yeah, if you're an ass, you're an American, and if you're polite, you're Canadian. I was like, oh, well, fair enough. Yeah, that's probably, of what the people they see, that's their determination. I was like, well, yeah, there you are.
The thing is, right, I've been to the States a few times, and people there are incredibly nice.
Yeah.
Nicer than I could ever be. And like we were in a restaurant once in California for breakfast, and I know like tips are huge in North America across the board. They're pretty, popular here and stuff, but tipping in America is like the thing, right? So, they were like, what kind of waffle do you want? We have blueberry and strawberry and chocolate and this and that. And they were like, they knew the whole menu like the back of their hand. And I was like, this is almost, annoyingly nice. Like you're way too giving here. We don't need this much energy this time in the morning, right? But that's what I mean. So like people are nice, but there is a stereotype, and I've seen it in action. Where you go abroad and like there's asshole Canadians too.
No, for sure, sure.
When people are loud and brash and or crass, openly and stuff like that, I think the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people are like Americans. So maybe the opposite is that they're Canadian, but that's not that true. I mean, there's a lot of dicks here too. So,
what also struck me is when I went over, so like my friend Andrew would come over here to the States, and everybody would instantly fall in love with him and his accent, and he was just so popular. And then we go over there, and it's just kind of, all right. And it's like I was asking Andrew,
like,
where
would you go?
I was in Queensland. I was in Brisbane.
Oh, in New Zealand,
or just in Australia, just around. And I was like, why isn't anybody impressed by us? Yeah, I just like because I was just looking at the juxtaposition, and he was like, yeah, it's like all of our media, like all the TV and movies we watch, it's all American stuff, so we're just kind of used to it. And so I was wondering, maybe that's where their impressions of Americans versus Canadians comes in, because like in American media, we really portray Canadians to be so polite and nice and apologetic and all that stuff. And a lot of our stuff shows Americans just being just asses. So I don't know. Maybe that's kind of where it comes from.
It's very aggressive, like projection of how people are. Because like I said, I've been to the States, and like one of the warmest receptions I've ever got in my life was in the States. We were in New York City, and we were in Brooklyn, and we were staying in an Airbnb, and I just heard this like cool music coming from the building next door. So we walked downstairs, went outside, and we hadn't noticed walking up, but we noticed that, at the time was that, I think it's called Mount Olive. It was like this tiny Baptist church in the middle of Brooklyn. And we walked in there, and I was like, we were not prepared to be in this church, because it was like all people of color and all black people, African Americans, I'll just say that. And they were all like super nice. They were in their Sunday best. Okay. And I was wearing a tank top and had sunglasses on like a complete jackass. And I felt super rude. But we went in there, we sat in the pew, and they did it was the whole, it's like what we see in the movies about these Baptist churches. They're like, Jesus, and they're screaming about Jesus. And there was like an 8-year-old kid leading the sermon. So much energy and like super passionate. And they clearly notice who we are. Like I'm like more sandy complexion because of my Arab background, but my wife is like, she's white. And so we stuck out kind of like sore thumbs, right? So, but they passed around the what's it called, the collection basket
plate. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I had like literally $1 on me, so I put it in there, and then they did the because they literally had a point they made me feel guilty. I think they knew I only had $1 in my wallet because they were like, give whatever you can, At one point, it wasn't associated with the plate, but anyways, they ended up sitting around. We did that, and then they did the whole part where they're like, shake hands and say peace be with you, right? And so we were just standing there. I wasn't even expecting anybody to shake my hand. And like literally the whole church started walking towards us and then giving us hugs. And like they were asking us, where are you from? Oh, we're from Toronto. And they're like, you came all the way from there? And I was like, well, yeah, I didn't come here from Canada. But I mean, like you had some pretty cool tunes. So I thought I'd come in and listen. But everybody gave us hugs. They were very welcoming. I felt genuine love. And that was like one of the times that I spent in the States. So it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, that sounds very akin to what we see here in the South, especially, with churches. I've been to a couple of Black services, and man, the energy is infectious. Like and it feels like they make you part of a community in a way that, like, me growing up in my predominantly white church, like, never did. Like, it always felt like a burden, a chore to be there, and it felt so celebratory the times I was in those other churches. So,
if church was like that, and my wife said it first, but if church was like that growing up, because we both grew up going to Roman Catholic churches, which is just a guilt trip every Saturday or Sunday, whatever. And but if church was more like the way it was at that Baptist church at Mount Olive, the way that we saw it, I'd probably still be religious, at least a little bit, because I felt like they were giving you something to believe in. That level of energy and dedication is undeniable. I don't believe in anything, anyways, for what it's worth anymore. But like I definitely felt the love, and I could see why being a part of a community like that is why people feel attached to religion itself, if that's the excuse for sticking together, for sure.
Yeah, and when you leave those places, you feel energized. You feel jazzed up.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
You leave on a high, sort of thing. Whereas I was always just staring at my watch, waiting for the time to tick down so I could get out of there. Whereas you guys were probably like kneeling, then standing, then kneeling, and then, So.
Oh, it was a nightmare. Yeah, it was a nightmare.
Oh my gosh. Well, you were talking about how you left Canada, you went abroad, and I was wondering, did you have, or would you describe yourself as kind of a nationalist before you left? Like, Canada's the best place on earth, and you really felt that, and was that kind of an awakening for you? Or did you feel like you were kind of shammed, like, what, they've been lying to me all this time?
So I wouldn't say I was a nationalist. I've never been had that type of feeling towards my country, like it's the best country in the world. I mean, keep in mind, like, my mom is Italian, and like, she was born here, but she didn't speak English till she was like 5 or 6 years old. My grandparents are from Italy, and I've been to their hometown several times. My dad's from Beirut, and my grandparents came here in the late 50s, early 60s, late 50s, I should say. And so even though they spent most of their time here, they brought their families here, their extended families here, and so a lot of the weekends were spent in those cultures. So I didn't spend a lot of my growing up time on the weekends specifically with Canadian culture, right? It's funny because I think, like, I would call myself white passing, especially with my voice, like the way that I sound anyways. So I haven't particularly experienced a lot of racism, although a lot of racism gets said in my presence. It's not directed to me. But I recognize it. And yeah, I think when I was growing up, it was like, I would do things with other kids and it would be fine. We'd have, like, friendship was never a problem, and there was never a lot of barriers or anything. But as soon as 9/11 happened, I was in high school. I was in grade 10. And then it became kind of a problem to have my last name,
right,
to have my skin color. Like, people would, white kids would make sounds of bombs blowing up around me and stuff like that, right? So you really figured out who you were pretty quick after that happened. If you were like me, right? So, yeah, that was, so I was never a nationalist because I didn't, there was a disconnection from me loving Canada and I guess like largely white culture, because I didn't experience white culture. I worked at my aunt's bakery from the time I was 12 years old. It was a Lebanese bakery. We were making pita bread and manushi, it's called. It's like a pizza, but with thyme as the topping, and a kawi cheese, which is just a specific type of cheese, but another kind of pizza thing. And so there was like all these foods that I would bring to school, and other kids would be like, "What's that? What's that?" They didn't recognize it. So there wasn't like it wasn't 100% cohesive, is what I'm saying. So it's not like I had this unfettered belief in my country or anything like that. And I think growing up here, we don't have things like critical race theory when I was growing up in school as part of the curriculum. But because there were Iranians and there were black kids and there were Chinese and Korean and Japanese kids in my school, and there were other kids from parts of Europe and a lot of Italians. There's a lot of Italians in Toronto as well, Greek people, and all these sort of different parts of the world. You still felt like everybody came from an immigrant family, so you kind of bonded over your differences. But going overseas, sorry to answer your question. Yeah, it was funny because we became the immigrants. So, when you're here or wherever you are and you have immigrants or refugees come to your country, there's, your fellow countrymen, whatever they, whatever you want to call them, can be critical. And they'll be like, come to your country and take your jobs and this and that. And that just sort of becomes part of the background noise. But then when you become the immigrant, you can really hear that sentiment. So like I would be working, I worked in an office at one place, and like on a few occasions, people would be like, "Oh, these immigrants coming and taking our jobs." And they would be Polish people, or they would be different types of Eastern Europeans typically at the time, or even Syrians and stuff, because there's a big exodus, right? And so I'm sitting there working, and they're like, "Oh, these bloody immigrants taking our jobs." And I'm like, "I'm a fucking immigrant taking one of your jobs." Like, you know what I mean? It's really awkward. But then when you ask them about it, they'll say, "You're not that kind of immigrant." So again, because I'm not as dark as some people, and because I don't have an Arabic accent.
And because you speak the language and all those things.
Yeah, you speak the language. They just say like, "You sound funny because you're Canadian. So you speak the wrong type of English," whatever. But to them, even people from the North and South speak the wrong type of English. Yeah. It's give and take. But you kind of like, I think what I gained from going over there in terms of like a national perspective or love of your country is nobody's great. There aren't really great countries. There are just great human beings. And I think most human beings are pretty great. But I think the idea of nationalism is terrible. We've seen it in action. It's horrendous. It doesn't make any sense. Like, borders are kind of silly, right? Like they're just these sort of made up lines and stuff. And anyways, I don't know if I want to get into geopolitics that deep.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think my experience opened up my mind to the fact that like, I don't care where I am, and I don't care where you've come from. If we can talk about food or we can laugh about X, Y, or Z, then we'll get along, right?
Yeah. So there's something you mentioned is like talking about immigrants and immigration. At this point, I've come to almost cringe when I hear the word immigrants, because I hate it as a term because people use it to dehumanize other people. Right. So over here, we just, we hear the same stuff. Obviously, immigrants coming over here taking our jobs. And for one, I like to say, well, have you ever met one of these people? Because they are humans with thoughts and feelings and hopes and dreams and families that they're trying to improve the lives of. It's like, have you ever sat down and talked to one? And I mean, generally the answer is no. Right. And so like, it's just like, I would rather you say their names Say, I hate Joe or I hate Bob. Don't say I hate immigrants, because immigrants is this ethereal boogeyman that doesn't exist. You know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate the way that we could so easily dehumanize people, immigrants, criminals, prisoners, whatever term you want to throw on, it just, to me, I hate that. I hate it.
Those are the hardest working people in the world. I mean, immigrants, refugees, criminals is a good shout out as well. Like, these people have everything working against them coming out of the gate, whatever that gate may be, whether it's a border or an actual gate from a cage or something. Like, they just have these preconditions and things. But these are the people that are working the hardest, whether it's to clear their name or prove themselves or run away from actual war. Like, I think like that blissful ignorance is really defined by people who complain about immigrants. And immigrants, like from my perspective, we were economic immigrants. I went there for a job, and we did succeed. We just happened to come back. But, hopefully the door's open to do it again. I mean, I would be open to doing that again if the opportunity is correct. And now I have a bit more insight into what it's like and some of the challenges that come with it. And some of that you're going to face, like bias and things like this. It doesn't matter where you're from. But yeah, I think the way that you describe the way that you hear the word immigrant is the same way I look at the Canadian flag now. Is I'm kind of like, it's used, whether it's a word or a symbol, it's used to, demoralize or dehumanize people. And these people are just making a life, dude. If they were like, if they were going to bomb Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? Those people would want to leave and come to Canada. And then imagine if these people who regularly talk about immigrants that way, now Canadians are talking about them like that, It's, you just got to put the shoe on the other foot for 2 seconds to see how offensive what you're saying really is.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for people to do that. It takes time and it takes energy. And they don't want to expend it, I think, sometimes.
Exactly.
But yeah. I hear some of that stuff come out of some people that I've seen with the greatest acts of kindness. They are the kindest people, and then they'll say stuff like that. And I think, do you really mean that? Or is this just the way you've been raised and conditioned? And when faced with the reality of, I have to tell this person, no, you have to stand out in the rain, they wouldn't make that choice. But for some reason, right now, in this moment, they feel like I don't know, because I have family members that are like that. And it's like, I know this is not the person you are. I'm not sure why you are confessing to be that person, because I've seen you do the opposite.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe people want to be nice and they want to be seen as nice. But then again, I mean, for all that what we're talking about, I think most human beings are pretty decent people.
I think you're right.
I don't think most people are dicks. I think social media and things on the internet are just like forums like Reddit and stuff like that. You just see the loudest people, and the loudest people are kind of the biggest assholes. You never see someone shouting like, I love immigrants, like that would, it just seems so out of the ordinary, right? You would never actually see that. But once in a while you do see people taking them in, and like when all the Syrian immigrants came to Canada, there was some backlash where people were being true assholes. Like, these people are running away again from war. But they came here, they were taken in by a lot of Canadians. It takes a lot of people to accept thousands of refugees into a new place and teach them whatever, the sort of rules, regulations, where to go to the DMV and what to do there and shit like that. And I've helped friends because of that experience myself. Like, I have a friend who came from Brazil. His name's Lorenzo, and he came from Brazil, and we went to school together for some time. And he's brand new. And anytime he's got a question, what I have to go to this office, or what do I do for my taxes, and where do I go for this, where do I go for that, I'm helping him do that. Like, it doesn't take a lot. You don't have to like open your house to people all the time. You can just kind of tell them which direction to go in, and that's helpful. But complaining about them because they've made a decision to like take a boat and go live somewhere else, or take a plane and go live somewhere else, it just, I think, is objectively unreasonable.
Yeah. For a lot of people, I say, if you were in a very unfortunate situation and you didn't do everything you possibly could to make a better life for your family, I was like, I feel like you'd be doing it wrong, don't you? And they're like, yeah. It's like, well, what do you think these people are doing, right? Just everything they possibly can to make a better life for their family. So, I don't know.
Exactly.
To me, it's pretty cut and dry if you just remember people are actual humans just like you. It's not hard to do.
Honestly, like, people make the claim, I'm just going to say this as maybe a last point about it, but like, I think a lot of people make that claim like, my granddaddy went to war and sacrificed and all that shit. And it's like, yeah, and that's what these people are doing. They're just running away from the war, except instead of running into it. You know, they're making their own sacrifices, and they're fighting their own war. You know, they're fighting their own thing, whether it's internal. Like, not every country has trillions of dollars of military might to kind of swing around, and like, not every country has citizens who are like armed to the teeth. You know, for an insurrection that could just happen.
I have no idea what you could be talking about. Who are these mythical people you're talking about?
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's the example. People do need it spelled out sometimes, right? It's like, look, like, these people are just, they're not able to fight, so they run. It's fight or flight. It's literally those two things. It's kind of basic. But I think, yeah, people who just kind of sit around and complain about, oh, these people are running away. Why don't they fight for their country? Because they're not allowed to have AR-15s in their bedroom closet, and, you know, stuff like that. So it's just, again, it's like we said, it's a shoe on the other foot kind of thing. Yeah. If you just imagine for a couple seconds what you would do in that situation with those same means at your disposal, you'd probably find yourself similarly doing that, right?
For sure. All right, man. Well, let's talk about something way sexier, and tell me how you got into transportation.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, it's like when I hear somebody who's like doing transportation and consulting on this, I think like a very measured, analytical mind of a person. But then I hear you're also a musician, so those seem almost diametrically opposed to me. So I'm just curious how that lives in the same body.
Oh, both sides of my brain are constantly fighting with each other. But realistically, like, I got into the world of transportation by it was like a summer job from high school. So a buddy of mine, his uncle worked at this company that they closed roads in downtown Toronto for big events. So like our Pride Festival and Santa Claus Parade and St. Patrick's Day Parade and marathons, you know, in different parts of the city or different parts of the province and things like that. We would put up the barricades, we would put up, you know, the big pylons and road closed signs and detours, and we would do construction sites and things like that too. But the big thing was on the weekends, was the big events.
Yeah.
And it was really good money we were 17 and we were making like $18 an hour. And the mid 2000s, like, that was a lot of money.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Right? So that was our gig, and that's kind of what I did for like 3 or 4 summers. And I did go to school. I went to college originally for business, dropped out because I hate financial math. I went to school for policing, and then got to the end of that course, and I was like, I never want to be a police officer.
I mean, sometimes that's what school's good at, is teaching you all the things you don't want to do, right?
Dude, all the teachers were like miserable, divorced, had no friends. And so I was like, do I really want to be like these people?
That way they can date their students. Easy.
Oh my God. Yeah, maybe. And so yeah, it was efficient at teaching me what I didn't want to do for sure. But then the whole time I was at school, I was still doing these jobs, closing roads and stuff. And it was fun. Like, you got to spend time with your friends. You know, we would spend 16, 18 hours sometimes working in the summer, doing these. We were at every big event. So like the Pride Parade in Toronto is like the 3rd or 4th biggest Pride event in North America. Santa Claus Parade is massive. These huge races. Like, we were overworked. We were very much.
Is that a pretty good flex? Does that help you pick up chicks in the bar? Hey man, I worked the Santa Parade.
No. It's terrible. You don't get, that's the thing with these. You don't get a life. You don't get a life because you're during the week, you're working 14 hours a day. And then during the weekend, you're working like, you know, 18 hours or 20 hours sometimes a day, because you're going to the yard, picking up equipment, going to the site, putting it down, going get more, and going back and forth. And there's only 2 people in a truck. So there's like, there's not a lot you can do, but it takes a lot of time anyways. One event we worked was the Mississauga is the next city to the west of Toronto. And they have a full marathon event every year. And so one year I worked that event with my friend Daniel, he was my partner in crime. I picked up a friend of mine, Matthew, and I picked up my brother to come in and do whatever part-time gigs. So anyways, by the time I had picked these two guys up, I had already worked about 15, 16 hours. Then I picked them up and I worked another 18 hours. And I think I only slept about 40 minutes.
Whoa.
And full on hallucinated, like during the time that I was sleeping. So I fell asleep on the corner of in the truck, but on the corner of a road. And somebody came up to the truck and it was like this really skinny black guy. And he was like, what direction do I go in for this road? And I was like, I don't know, go left, right, and you'll find it. And then like 2 weeks later, this chubby white guy that we worked with came up to me and he was like, you looked really tired that day I came up to you. And I was like, what? So I had hallucinated this skinny black dude, realized it was like my chunky white buddy who was in a full truck. And this like other black guy that asked me for directions was in a red sports car or so I thought.
Oh my gosh.
It was wild. I'd never hallucinated like that before in my life. I blew through a red light that like one of the nights out there and stuff like that. Just completely. My buddy was like just as tired sitting next to me, Daniel, and he's like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure that was a red light." And I just look in the rearview mirror, and sure enough, but it was like 3 a.m.
Right.
So there was nobody out, thankfully, because
Yeah.
that could have been extremely dangerous. But yeah, that was insane. But from there, anyways, so after I was kind of done school, I stopped doing that for a little bit. And then I don't even remember what I did in between, but then I started working for another company who kind of did the same thing, but then started doing more technical stuff. So I started working in something called Intelligent Transportation Systems. So for short, it's ITS. It's mostly has to do with like data collection. And sort of like adaptive signal technology and LED lighting and sort of motion detecting and things like that anyways. And so, yeah, so I had kind of did that. It was a hybrid at that second job where I was a site supervisor, so I was still doing the physical stuff and then kind of doing the technical bits on the side. Went to then go work for a software startup who was run by a good friend of mine at the time. And I worked for him for about 5 months, and they had built this software. It's called what's it called? I think it's an advanced traffic management system. So basically they aggregate a lot of the city's infrastructure onto a web-based platform. So you can see what events are going on, the health and the maintenance of the traffic signals, where the buses are at any given time and things like that. So again, it's a big aggregate thing and that helps organize things anyways. So actually I worked for them for 5 months and then I got fired the very week I got married by my friend who hired me, who was also one of my groomsmen. Right. So that was an interesting week. And then we ended up going on, like, I couldn't find another job because we were going on our honeymoon like the next week. So I just enjoyed those 2 weeks off that we had, came back, and then I couldn't find work for like several months.
Oof.
Yeah, it was pretty tough actually. And then at one point I was like, I have Italian citizenship, like I'm a dual citizen. And I was like, let me see if I can find work in Europe. And my wife was like, if you can find work, then we'll go. Because up until that point, she was like, I'm never moving. And so then she was like, if you can find work, we'll go. Yeah. And so I found one interview in Canada, and then there was like an event in England, a traffic transportation event, right? With vendors and shit. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go there. I'm going to spend like my last $1,000 of disposable money and go to this event, and I'm going to schmooze the shit out of everyone and try to get a job. So I went to the interview in Canada, Then I went to Birmingham, where this thing happens. It's called Trafex. And before I went, I think I emailed like 500 people on LinkedIn, like an insane amount of copy pasting for the couple months leading up to this thing. I got to the event. I was sort of already in contact consistently with 2 people. So I met up with them, had dinner with them. It was an amazing time. They were great people. And then I got 2 job offers. So one was in London for £17,000 a year.
Oof.
Which, yeah,
big baller.
And I have it's so disgustingly low. It's already below the poverty line. And I asked my buddy who was living in London at the time, and he's like, I wouldn't be able to buy my groceries for £17,000 a year in London. So he was like, don't come live here for that. And so I said, okay. So then the other offer was in Leeds in northern England, which is about an hour east of Manchester. And that was for £21,000, which obviously doesn't sound like a lot more, but in northern England, it goes a lot further. Like we were able to buy a house. We had a car. We went on vacations probably 4 or 5 times a year. And we had savings, and
wow.
Yeah, it was a fantastic time, to be honest. The quality of life was quite high.
How long were you over there? A couple of years?
3.5 years.
3.5. I mean, that's enough time 4. To really get a feel of the place, huh?
We loved it. Yeah, we carved out a niche for ourselves. Like we have friends who we still talk to and we still love more than anything. It was really great. Like, honestly, I do regret leaving a lot all the time. So it's weird, but and it's tough now because of Brexit, right? Brexit was not the reason we left, but I mean, it was it wasn't looking great, at the time, because we were there and I voted on it as a European citizen. I could. So I voted against it, and whatever, it went through, and it's been a shit show ever since. And I think it's only going to get worse. That's the only thing that makes it unattractive to go back, is that they're not a part of the European Union, which means my passport doesn't allow me free movement there.
Oh, so your Italian passport is how you were able to kind of more easily get in. That makes sense.
So I live there as an Italian. Yeah. Oh. And so the funny thing is, now I'd have to pay visas if I live there and work there every year. If I went down to the States and lived and worked there, I have to pay for a visa. Whereas I could go to 27 other places in Europe countries and live there, work there, buy a house, and be a part of a productive member of society just because of the one passport. So actually, I think that's a huge benefit. What else? Yeah. It was an incredible journey. And then, because I was doing traffic stuff there. So I had gotten a job installing this ITS hardware all over England. So I worked for a company that did studies and collected data. Mm-hmm. So we did physical studies where people would literally spit. You would be lined up on the road and a cop would tell a bunch of cars, come here, we need to ask you origin destination questions. So where are you coming from? Where are you going? And they use that information to decide, the volumes of roads and how roads are geometrically designed, and if they're reaching capacity, or which roads are being used to get to which destinations, right? But for some reason, I never did this here, but if for some reason in England they still did roadside surveys, and people would get spit on all the time. I'm just you're coming up, and I'm like, where did you come from? Asda. Where are you going? My house. And then maybe one other question, and they'd be like, fuck off, dickhead. And they would just speed off and stuff. And I'm like, abuse. But the cool thing is you're in a foreign country and you get to travel around and do a bunch of stuff. So we would, the first job I ever had in England was at Wimbledon at the tennis championships, right? So we set up 44 cameras and a bunch of Bluetooth devices to detect Bluetooth signals and stuff, and what we did was we monitored the crowds and how they moved to kind of get an idea of the Wimbledon, the actual tennis club wanted to know how to, where to place vendors and where to place things so that advertisements, so people would see them more, and also from that, a lot of stadiums use this methodology to decide exit strategies for emergencies and how best where to put the doors, how best to design lanes and things like that. But yeah, we were on Henman Hill watching Andy Murray win the Wimbledon championship. So, which is the first time a British person did that in like fucking 40 years or something. So it was like a huge event to be a part of. But we got to watch, like I got to watch, what's his name? The Spanish guy.
Nadal?
Rafael Nadal. So I got to watch him practice while I was on top of the BBC Broadcasting Center for Wimbledon. I got to watch Serena Williams practice in like the practice center. So it had its perks. And then you'd go to like these remote places. Like I'd gone to like Ben Nevis, which is in Fort William in Scotland. And that was an incredible drive. There's never a more terrifying drive I've done than driving into Fort William with a manual vehicle, because the roads to get in are so constantly turning and winding and things like that. Like you're just constantly between second and third and fourth gear. It's a full-on bicep workout getting into that place. So that happened. And then that workplace was kind of a little bit toxic. Like the experience was great, but the management was kind of toxic. So I found a job that was where I used AutoCAD to design work zones. So I would meet with like a developer or whatever utilities company, and they said, okay, we're going to cut out this portion of the road, and we're going to cut out this portion of the road. So we need a safe work zone for our workers. So I would use AutoCAD and be like, okay, the cones need to go here, the signs need to go there, and this is how traffic should move, and this is how the detour should be designed. And in England, you have to do that for every work zone, no matter how small it is. They have to have a traffic management plan approved by the council for every site that you work on. So I would do that for dozens and dozens and dozens of plans. So I got really good at AutoCAD. And then we decided to leave. One reason was like we wanted to start a family and then have a support network of our own family around us. So we decided to kind of come back, and then we never ended up having kids, so it didn't really matter. And but that was okay.
Was that
so we did
by
this huge
choice or not? That have kids part?
Yeah, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. So I'll get into that in a second, but the full story just being like from when we decided to leave England, we wanted to do a big, huge road trip. Huh. So we got in our car. We did a 3-month road trip through Europe. And then we stayed with our friends in a town called Beverly for a couple weeks, and then we came back home. And then the first job I found was at the City of Toronto's Traffic Operations Center. I think that's what it's called. And basically you watch like 60 or whatever, 100 televisions, all broadcasting the cameras on the highways. And so we would watch for like incidents, accidents, construction sites, things that were going on. We would change the message boards on the gantries, above the highways and things like that. And so we just kind of were the eyes on the road. And that job sucked. That job was so shitty. It was underpaid. It was poor management. And it was just a shit job. It was like a round the clock job. So you'd have to do shifts. You'd do the night shift, and who wants to work the night shift, And it was kind of boring because all you did was watch traffic literally all day on 60 TV screens. So it's not exciting. It's not challenging in any way. And the people who were like the managers were like, they weren't transportation professionals. They were like, they worked in a call center. They were like call center management. So they worked for like telecom companies. And I was like, I can't work for idiots like this. Like I have to go work with people that I respect. Right. So I went back to school. So I took a 3-year course. I did it in 2.5 years. And I graduated in April of 2020, and I immediately started working at where I work now. And it's the most supportive workplace that I've ever worked in, and I get to work with people that I respect. I get to work with super like intelligent people, and they give me guidance, and it's a unionized environment. So there's a lot of like support among the workforce for each other. So yeah, anytime I have a question, I don't feel like I'm going to get like, like, oh, why are you asking me? You should know this. Everybody is always helpful. So making that decision to like go back to school, to go and, and I was lucky to find work given the time scale. But yeah, going back to school was the best decision. And I had found out what I really liked. I'd worked in transportation for long enough where I was like, this is kind of where I want to be. And I do want to work with people who are really good at this. So I need to get at least somewhat good at it to be able to get my foot in the door and be there. And that's kind of what I did. So
it sounds like kind of a niche thing. So it makes me curious, like, what is it about it that really, I mean, well, one, I mean, I could kind of see how your career progressed and how you ended up staying in it. But what is it about it now that really like scratches some itch in your brain that makes you really enjoy it? Because it sounds like you, at this point, you actually truly enjoy what you're doing.
It's funny you say it like that, because I don't necessarily love my job.
Yeah.
I don't love engineering for the sake of engineering. I respect engineers, and I respect engineering, and I respect the detail-oriented aspect of it. And I love getting stuck into the nitty-gritty of the details. Because I work like in the public service, we deal a lot with like policy and regulations and legislation, and I can dig right into that, and I can find things that are inconsistent, and I can communicate in a way that makes me respect myself. But largely, I don't love work. I actually hate work. I think working is stupid, and if I had like $5 million, I would never work a day in my life again. But I have to work, so I might as well do something that I respect.
Respect it.
Because I think, that speaks to me more. Than I know people are like, do something you love. And that's cool if you can make money doing something.
And you can actually find something that you love that has money behind it.
Yeah. And so like, I love playing bass, but I wasn't necessarily encouraged to be, to go into an artistic field. I think that has a lot to do with it as well, to be honest with you. And maybe this is a better conversation for a therapist, but like, with my upbringing, and again, I got to bring the immigrant life into it a little bit, because there's just that, especially, I mean, in my experience, it's Italian and Arab. So it was like, you can be a business person, you could be a lawyer, a doctor, an airplane pilot, or an engineer. Mm-hmm. You have 5 choices in life, and that's it. So I tried business, and I didn't do well at it. I hate financial math. I still don't understand how that debits and credits work. Thankfully, my wife does, and she's like a bookkeeper, so she knows exactly what she's doing with that. So that saved my life, or saved my bank account, anyways. And but like structural math, physics, and things like that, I can chew into that. So it's something that I'm like capable of. But it did take years to figure out what kind of math I really did enjoy. But again, because it was limited, it was like I played bass when I was a kid. But it was never like, oh, you can definitely succeed. You can be a session bass player. Here, go to school to be a bass player or a musician or a producer. It was like, what are you going to business for? It better be accounting, or it better be engineering. And that's terrifying when you're a kid. You don't fucking know what you want to do with your life. So as much as I would love to make money playing bass, I can't do that at the minute. And I never got the opportunity to explore it. I did the next best thing, which is like I kind of like cut my teeth for 10, almost 15 years in the field of transportation, and then went back to school. And I went back to school a lot because even though I had the physical experience or the field experience, I didn't think I was going to get enough respect to be in the environment, in the engineering environment, without sort of paying my academic dues. And that's what going back to school was paying my academic dues. And I did that. And that's something I can be proud of for sure. And that's kind of why I keep doing it.
I'm starting to put some pieces together. So I've heard you say the word respect several times in relation to your job. One was, I couldn't stay in this environment because I didn't respect the management. And the idea of you being respected amongst your peers is really important. Where do you think that piece comes in? Why do you think that's so important? Because it's obviously, I mean, it drove you to leave one place and is what makes you satisfied at staying at the one job. Obviously nobody wants to work, right? But it's making you satisfied at least in the place you are now. Like why is being respected by your peers so important? Or is it just the fact that if you can't respect somebody like in a position of authority, you have trouble working with them, so you want people to respect you so they'll want to work with you?
I think like before I had finished school, or before I went to school, I wanted to be respected by people, and I thought that being in the field for so long gave me that, but it didn't, because there were words that people were using that I didn't understand. There was phrases, there was ideas that people were talking about that I didn't understand, and I needed to go through school to be able to understand those concepts. Now that I have my academic dues and I have I have my field experience, I don't give a shit what people think about me, because I've proven it to myself. So I kind of respect myself. Why I think respect is such a big word, or such a word that I've used often enough, is kind of, I don't know. I think, if you don't respect the people you work for, there's no motivation. I don't have any motivation for doing something that, like, if, I don't know, it's a difficult thing to define off the bat.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. I mean, I respect like what my grandparents did. You know, they came here and they built a life for themselves, and they scraped by, and they got educations, or they had trades and they did skillful things. My parents lived that immigrant life way harder than me, and they both went to university, and they both did really well in their lives, and they continue to do well. So it's a kind of a thing where, I mean, I think any parent probably wants their kids to beat them at life, if they can. And it's been tough for millennials, I think, in general. But we're not doing too bad at the minute, and which, we're grateful for. But it's a slog, man. It's a slog, I think it's pretty obvious. But I don't know. I think because I don't believe in God, I think I want to respect other people. Like I don't have a belief thing. I'm not like, I believe in God. I believe in the goodness of human beings. I just want people to be like competent and relatively productive. And if you're not, and you're in a position of power, and you don't have an education that is right for that position, or you don't have the experience, because a lot of like construction and a lot of jobs in general have like nepotism. So that's something I don't respect. Okay. I don't respect when you get a job because of like who you know. I think that's a silly way to do it, because I worked for 15 years in the field. I went to school and I got this job that's like pretty difficult to get if you don't have like an engineering background. So earning that respect through academics and through field practice is like, yeah, it's a big deal to me. I don't know if I can define it actually.
No, I get you. I get you. So,
but it's important to me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can 100% see that. So something you mentioned earlier that kind of makes me curious is, the immigrant parent mentality. I've talked to some other people that told me, because that's not the truth I live, but I've talked to some other people kind of about that. Well, one person in particular was a lawyer, and they were a very successful lawyer. And then one day they stopped being a lawyer and became an artist. And they were like, because I was a lawyer for my parents, and
right.
And so I was like, man, that stuff runs deep. You know what I mean? Like I don't like, to me, like I don't have that, but it's like, that was pretty eye opening for me. And so I was thinking a lot of those parents, right? They, they put so much emphasis among, well, you said there were like 5 jobs you could have. And I guess the 6th job would be, you could be a disappointment to the family, right? That's the 6th choice. But there's so much pressure and stress associated with that it's also like, I want my parent to like respect what I do. I want them to see me as an individual that's successful and I'm succeeding in my field. And, you know, I've met some kind of standard. And I wasn't trying to say that that was your truth. It was just something that kind of occurred to me because, yeah, like I've heard from, other folks like yourself, man, that is, because that gets born into you pretty much, you know, from the womb. It's like that is impressed upon you from the time you are a child. And that stuff is hard to get out of you.
Oh, dude, like so growing up, like I said, my dad tried to teach me math, for years, and he failed miserably because it was like I shouldn't say he failed, but he definitely was very aggressive. He's not a great teacher. Let's put it that way. He's not a good teacher, which is ironic because my mom is a teacher, but she's a French teacher. But anyways, so my dad's amazing at math, like amazing. He can think of like percentages, and he can do fucking long division in his head, and I can't do that. I need a calculator, and I have been to engineering school, so but I'm also not confident enough sometimes in my a mental math. But anyways, yeah, he's just incredible at math, and he just couldn't get through to me. But the thing is like he's a business guy, right? Like he's a businessman. So I did go to business school, and I did that because I was like, I think this would impress my dad if I was going to succeed at that. So I did try it and failed at it. So at the time, I was like 17, 18. I was like, man, I am a huge disappointment. So let me go pick something easy. So I went and picked this policing course because there's a lot of people that I met in it. And I was like, it seems kind of easy if this guy's doing it. And you know what I mean? Like, and it was, I passed. So I have a diploma in police foundations, they call it. But it didn't stick. And the thing that stuck was the thing that I did enjoy doing, which was working in the transportation field. I like talking about engineering concepts. I like talking about things that made traffic move better and people travel safer. And I like talking about efficiencies and optimization in infrastructure and things like that. So yeah, it took a while, but I got there on my own, and it was my own decision. So yeah, that's the case.
I get it, man. Well, we are bumping up on time, so I wanted to talk about your podcast a little bit because I know this is like that is like your passion project, the thing so let's do a hard cut, man. Let's move over to that because I definitely I just want to just talk to you about it a little bit. You happen to be on a podcast and you happen to do podcasts, and ultimately that's how we ended up connecting through somebody else was kind enough to give us a referral, and yours is Social Animals, right? So tell me about it. Why is that important to you?
Yeah. It's so podcasting is hilarious. So Social Animals is Social Animals is an interview based or an interview style storytelling podcast about friendships. So it's kind of like I bill it like the good, bad, and ugly anecdotes of our closest chosen connections. And yeah, it's funny, or it's important to me, or was important to me to start it because I wanted other people's interpretations of, I wanted other people's stories. I wanted to hear their stories about friendship because I thought I had a few that were interesting. By way of growing up here and growing up with the people that I did, through the experiences that I had, and then moving overseas and having those experiences, and traveling and meeting people, having people come into your life, briefly, and you're like, is that a friend? Yes, I can say that's a friend, even though we knew each other for a week, and then never saw each other again. That was still, we had a very good connection, so I would call that person a friend. Or I had like my friend who was my groomsman and then fired me the week after I got married. And then we actually stayed in touch when I moved overseas. But then like 2 years later, he got married and then dropped off the face of the planet. And nobody in either of our friends groups know where the fuck he is. So it's like that's interesting. When you get into the details, I think it's really interesting to see how our interpersonal platonic relationships have shaped us as human beings. And I think, or I hope, that's what people get out of listening to the stories. So yeah, it's important because we need connections in our lives as well. Like we are social animals, right? So it's cool to hear how we got there and how we use that term and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. And like it occurs to me, like when you were talking about that, what is the definition of a friend? And that's going to be different every person you talk to. It also makes me think about, like, you're gathering a lot of empirical data. Imagine the transportation guy who's done a lot of analysis of things over time would do that. But I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but the idea that, every person you interview, you can make assumptions and then see what the empirical data matches up, what are the trends as far as, what do people consider friends, or, like how they meet people or maybe their significant others. I bet you see a lot of interesting parallels.
Oh man, like there's answers that come up that are fairly similar, and they all have their own sort of spice, right? Added to them, but it's incredible. Like I have an episode in the can right now that I'm working on, and it's sort of a format. It's a different format, and it's with a guest that I've had on previously. His name's Dr. Thomas Brooks. He's from Texas, actually, as well.
Yeah.
I think he lives in New Mexico now, but he's a professor, and he is a sociologist. And we discussed. So he did the podcast in its sort of original form. In my first season. And then he came on more recently, and we just talked about imaginary friends. So one of the questions is like, have you had an imaginary friend? And so we just talked about the idea of imaginary friends and where it came from and how long it's been studied and what some of the assumptions are involved in that concept. And I actually did build an Excel sheet because that's like kind of my thing. I built an Excel sheet to see how many people had answered the question with yes, what they answered. So some people are like, I had a teddy bear, I had fairies, I had a belt or something that I used to associate or personify, right? Or if it was just pure like one guy, his name's Samir Cash, he's a great musician, and he talked about when he used to drive in the car with his parents, because his parents were musicians. So he would follow them around and he would be dragged around with them and as they toured and stuff. And so he spent a lot of time in the car. So we would have these two friends, Icto Bicto and Cali Wally, that would live inside the gas canister. When you open the gas can, the housing for where your gas thing is in your car, they would live inside there. And then when his parents would go get gas and fuel up, they would come out and they would spend time with him in the car and chill with them. And then they'd hop back in and they would continue on their way, as their parents would drive. So, the range of stories is pretty incredible. But it's funny because because Thomas had said that there's like a 20% rate that people have imaginary friends or something. I mean, you can wait till the episode to find out what he actually said.
Yeah.
It was like the same ratio where studies had been conducted to say, did you have an imaginary friends? Let's say the ratio is 20% in that study. My guess also turned out to have about 20% return on how many people did have it. So, yeah, I mean, some of this stuff is data collecting. It just sort of happens to be in the form of storytelling.
What makes me think about that too is like, are there parallels that are associated with that? Like the people that did have imaginary friends, do they find themselves in more creative careers as adults? Because to me, that's like, well, whoa, it seems like there's a lot of creativity associated with that. Does that actually track over here or there? Like my brain always goes to directions like that. I don't have the energy to actually put that information together, but I'm always curious about it.
Yeah, well, the table that I had made had did they have siblings? What, did they have, were their parents together if we knew that information? So there was a lot of metrics that I was kind of tracking throughout the process. And then, there were parallels. There were some, it's tough because when people grow up, most people lose that connection. They don't actually remember it properly. And that goes for everybody. And so it's difficult, but for the people that really do remember it, and I talk to a lot of creatives. Some of my guests are my close friends, and they also happen to be creatives. But a lot of my guests are musicians, artists, authors, storytellers in their own right, and everybody that I've talked to at least 20% of them, from my data gathered, has had imaginary friends. So it's a fun question to ask and a fun question to hear the stories about, for sure.
Yeah. And, like you said, you have a kind of a set list of questions you're going to ask, but it varies guest by guest. You do a lot of really good editing and mix things up. But even then, no two people have the same answer, and it varies wildly. So it's so funny that even from the exact same starting point, those paths diverge so wildly. That's to me, that's one of like the more interesting bits, is you never quite know where it goes, and it kind of turns into this little game where I start trying to get a sense of the person, and then as you answer, or rather ask the question, I try and sort of speculate in my mind which direction they're going to go with their answer, and I'm never correct. I mean, it's always something
that's
unexpected.
The thing. Yeah, and like we were talking about before, like human beings they all have their own stories. They're all like really interesting people. You don't get to be 30 years old, or I've had people as young as 21, and like you don't get to spend 21 years on your life and have boring relationships all the time, right? Like you try to make life exciting. Everybody kind of does that, depending on their level of accessibility to that. But yeah, so that's where I took it from. Off Menu Podcast, right, is where they ask sort of the same questions every time. So I kind of started doing that, and it's changed now where I let people sometimes pick just a few questions and things like that that they'll have more robust stories for. Because there was a point where I was like, did you do that? Like, did you have this experience? Did you have that experience? And they're like, no. Or they might just muse about it because they didn't really have a story about it. So now I try to get the guests to choose the questions, a handful of questions that they think they'll have really great stories for. But I always ask, who was your very first friend? Because I think that really kicks it off. That's a really big diving board for people to think back, because you got to think about all the friendships in your lives, right? So who was your very first one? Was it someone on the street? Was it a kindergarten? Where did they come from, and what did you do together, and things like that, right? So, yeah.
And my memory is like very relative. So, if you were to walk up and say, "Tell me a joke," I'm probably going to draw a blank. But in the course of a conversation, I'll think of 20 stupid things I could say, in that moment that would be funny. So, I think in that same sense, starting with like some default questions are probably going to help inform things. But like in my case, I found that very useful, because it also presenting me with the questions also helped me kind of like start musing over, where do I have those more robust stories, and then that would sort of make me think about something else, and giving me time to sort of muse over it, I think helps me, fill that stuff out. Whereas here, I just like to, ambush people with questions, so it's a little bit more difficult.
I've been on one other podcast where it was a straight up ambush, and it was like you should go listen to it anyways, because it is crazy. Like it's this guy called Cam Brio, and he's actually a really, really nice guy, and I talk to him all the time still on like Instagram. But he did a podcast with somebody, and I was like the person didn't even know how to answer. They were like, where are these questions coming from? And then then I was like, I don't know, I think he asked me to be on or something like that. And I went on, and he was like, this question, it was a music-based podcast. He's like, what do you think of Greta Van Fleet? He didn't let me know that he was going to ask me about that. And I had never heard of that band before. So I just kept being like, well, I can't really talk to that because I don't know who they are, but I'll talk about this. So I think, it worked out in the end, but it was like, I was kind of like happy at that point where I was like, I'm glad I give the questions to people, because I was not prepared for any of this. But yeah, I think I let people choose a few questions now, or like their own specific ones that they like to start off with, because, those can also go in any direction. Yeah. I'm not going to like browbeat someone to like, no, this should be about your friends, not this other time that you spent with your dad. Like, I'm not going to do that. Right.
Yeah.
So it's just a starting off point, but there are great stories from people's entire lives, and even other people that I've met. and I don't meet a ton of people, but some people I've met have been like, I think about the stories in my life, and I think about old friends from those questions while I'm listening, and that's kind of the idea, right? Is to reminisce really about this stuff. So I'm glad that's doing that for people. And it's funny, I went out last night to one of my guests' album release party. His name's Joe McLeod, and he's such a genuine dude. But one of his friends that he talked about in his episode was there. And I've met guests in person before, but I've never met a character from one of their stories in person. Yeah, her name's Erin. She's really cool. And so she flew in from like Canmore for the show, Canmore, Alberta, which is huge. It's like a 4-hour flight. But so she was really nice. And she was like, yeah, I heard his episode, but I actually had heard of your podcast before, like her friend was on it uniquely, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, it's not like like a music show. This is kind of how I describe it sometimes. Like, podcasting is great because you're like, your voice is getting out to a bunch of people, but you never see those people. It's not like you go to a concert, there's 300 people in the room, and you're like, holy shit. But if you look at your downloads and you have 300 people at the end of the month who listen to your podcast, you're like, I don't know 300 people. Who the fuck is listening? Like, I wish I could see these people because I want to feed off of them. But sometimes those numbers are just enough. Like, it's fantastic that people listen. It's almost weird sometimes.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
For me, like, part of it too is like the unintended consequences, maybe the collateral damage, where you actually have a positive impact on somebody that you will never meet, who you will never cross paths with, but something one of your guests said or something you were able to pull out of somebody else, will actually make a tangible difference in this person's life. That's like, for me, like sometimes in my my nighttime thoughts, that little period where you're just about to go to sleep, something like that will pop in my head. And it's sort of wild to think about, that you could be taking time and effort and putting this out and you actually make a positive impact on somebody else. It's wild.
Yeah. I mean, I spoke with a disabilities advocate her name's Ardra Shepherd, and she's an MS advocate. And she's an incredible person. She's a fantastic writer. And, you learn more about their perspective. Now, so I had her on because, number one, I respect her and I like what she does. But my wife has MS as well. And that's how I found out about her. My wife knew her before I did. So introduced me to her anyways. But you just gain a different perspective. So every time you meet someone, you have a different perspective, whether it's on friendship, whether it's something that they struggle with. Another friend of mine, his name's Jaffer. We're like friends now. We did this interview. I didn't really know him before, but we did the interview for my show. And I've been to a couple of his concerts. We've gone out to dinner together. I learned more about his life. He worked in journalism and now he works in like nonprofit sector and things like that. And he's consistently bringing things up. He's Iraqi. So I get to hear about his perspective growing up in London, England as an Iraqi kid. And we sort of share somewhat of a sort of shared experience, but again, a totally different perspective on most things. And I think I'm like, selfishly, it's an enriching experience to talk to so many people.
Yeah, you like become a better human with every conversation.
I can't believe you said that. Yeah. I've literally thought of that phrase so many times in the last 2 weeks. Being a better human being. Yeah, not a better man, not a better woman, not a better American or Canadian, just a better human. Right? We all share almost the exact same DNA, right? We are all so similar inside. And there's only one human race, dude.
Yeah, that's it. Supposedly there's this experience that like all astronauts have, that once they get up in space and they look back at the Earth, and it's the size of a marble, that they all have this sense of connection to all people, right? We're not like all these separate nations. We're not all these. I mean, we are complex creatures, but we're all essentially the same. We have wants and feelings and thoughts. And there's like this, supposedly like this very distinct feeling in this way that I'm not going to say all of them, but a lot of them change. And when they come back, they feel more connected to everybody else. And I'll tell you what, having these conversations with people have done that for me in spades. Like to be able to understand people and their motivations, and how people are not so different from me or very different from me in these obvious ways, but in certain ways we're just the same. It's so enriching. I don't know. Just it makes me better, tiny little bits all the time, and I love it.
I think the whole idea is to keep talking to one another.
Yeah.
Like we've been isolated for so long, for the last 2 years, whatever, in various situations, but and we talk to our very close friends. Like my parents are still friends with the exact same people they've been friends with since high school, and that's great. But speaking to new people all the time is a very good way to gain way different perspective than you see. It opens up like a good version of Pandora's box, right, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it just opens up, a whole new perspective, and you can see the world completely differently, and you will be more compassionate. The compassion part of it, I think, it really gets highlighted when you start talking to new people.
Yeah, and more empathetic. Now I've learned to approach people with curiosity, right? Don't make assumptions. Don't assume positive intent. Don't assume malicious intent. Just come with curiosity. I love that, right? Ask questions. People want to talk to you for the most part. They want, people's favorite subject is themselves, and they are more than happy generally to tell you about that. Well, I mean, there's a few that are, a vault, but for the most part, people, and while we're talking about this, listening to your podcast, it is indistinguishable from me when you're talking to your friends or a complete stranger. I can't tell the difference.
Oh man, I appreciate that so much.
The way you approach people, it is so congenial, so smooth. I don't know if you're like a duck on the surface, you're smooth, and on the bottom, your feet are going like crazy. But it's very polished and warm, and I appreciate that about every one of your podcasts. That it seems like you really put folks at ease, and I think that's a true gift. I don't know if that's a talent that you had to work at, or if it was just in you from the beginning, but man, it's awesome thing to see.
I mean, I've always loved hanging around with people. So, whether it's at parties or, like I said, I worked with my friend Daniel for several years. We worked in the same truck together. So, but being close with different people and gaining that insight, just keep talking. I know people are like introverts, and that's totally valid. But the interaction with new people, different people, consistently doing that sort of stuff, it's certainly helped. I love it. Thank you for saying that. I do have a lot of anxiety, actually. Usually when I'm talking to people, I have like a little squishy thing that my wife made. It's just like a little bag of rice, but I'm sort of fumbling with it in my hands, because otherwise I'd be moving and twitching and doing all sorts of things for nervous energy. But I really appreciate that. It must be the editing.
No, you slow your voice way down so you don't sound so manic. No, man. We're right here at time, and I'm gonna ask you, how people can interact with you in just a minute. But there, you contain multitudes. There's a bunch of stuff we didn't give the touch. You're, the way you're a caretaker for your wife. You getting, you're being a bass player, all the tattoos, and that relationship with you, and how much that means to you. So, I would impress upon everybody listening that you do touch upon these things. A little more of Alex comes out in each one of these episodes, which I also love. I don't like just hearing one side of the story. I love to hear a conversation, so you're really good at that too. So I would definitely say, I know we didn't get to touch upon it here. That's totally okay, because I wanted this to go whichever direction you wanted it to. And
I can come back. I really enjoyed myself, and you made me feel super comfortable. And I love your voice, dude. You have a great voice.
I don't know, man. It makes me wonder. I've heard other people say that. To me, I don't know. It's the voice in my head. It makes me wonder, do you think Morgan Freeman thinks his voice is just another voice, or do you think he hears and he's like, man, I am a badass?
No, he talks like that for a reason, because he likes to hear himself speak.
Morgan Freeman. Yeah, it always makes me wonder, does he love the sound of his own voice? Because it is like, I mean, it is, I don't know, you know, I think if you've never experienced ASMR, just, you know, put your earbuds in and listen to Morgan Freeman.
I have to disagree on ASMR. I'm not a huge fan of ASMR.
Me neither.
Like, but when it comes to like, you know, eating fucking bananas and shit, I don't get it.
Oh, yeah.
But if it's like somebody's voice, like, yeah, Morgan Freeman, Seth Rogen, there's just like these really unique voices out there that I do like really love to hear. And it's nice. It's like, you know, when the dude, like the Big Lebowski, sits in his apartment and he's listening to the bowling pins on his headphones, on his Walkman. I could just do that with some like voiceover artists. And that's another reason, you know, I do this too. I really just love practicing what my voice sounds like. I know it sounds like, here's the thing. There's a reason I edit it. I edit my podcast because I tell a lot of the same stories to people. Of like my own stories. I keep in the new ones. That's why it sounds like it gets more evolved. But it's like, yeah, I do like hearing people's voices, and I like the interaction that I get to have. I've done almost 60 interviews.
Wow.
I think what just came out, number 53, episode 53 is coming out this week. And I've done that in like 55 weeks. So it's hectic. I'm actually going to like slow it down pretty
really
soon
hectic,
because
yeah.
It's taking over, as you know, it takes over a large part of your life. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I like talking to people, and I like hearing people's stories, and it's practice for me to listen. I mean, you can hear, and people who've listened to this entire podcast can hear how much I talk. So it's good practice for me to sit down and listen to people as my podcast. So,
well, you know, I noticed when you were telling me your story, you were telling me about you know, your career and the traffic stuff and how all that sort of transpired. And you really lit up when you were talking about your time in the UK, and it was all about discovery. So even if you were doing a mundane task, it was the discovery. It was the new thing you were going to find. You know, it was the new experience you were going to have. And it sounds like you're sort of getting that through the podcast, right? You're finding that discovery through these people, you know, the new thing. What am I going to learn from them? You know, like what interesting thing is going to come out of this? So it sounds like you're still getting your adventures. You're just finding a different outlet for it. And I think it's really cool because it's a shared experience now, right? It's not something just for you now, kind of everybody else gets a taste of that too. And I love people that are out there collecting stories for everybody else.
Oh yeah. Thanks, man. I mean, this is a pretty cool podcast too. And I know we talked about Rocky before, and she's fantastic, but you always learn. I mean, it's a platform. You're giving me a platform. She's had a platform, and you give that to people, and they eat it up because it's a chance for them to give their listeners or you know, whatever, people that engage with them, another side of themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not like a musician going on a musician's podcast and talking about being a musician. You know what you're going to get. But a musician going on a podcast about friendship are going to talk about their own friendships and their experiences, and that's a side you might not get in a different sort of interview, right, or an article about them or something. So that's another reason I kind of focus on friendships as well. It gives people, it's a totally different dimension that you don't really get to hear about a lot.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I dig it. I mean, it's such a simple but effective concept. Works really well.
Thanks.
All right, man. Well,
thanks, dude.
I have consumed way too much of your time. I always say that I try and be respectful of time, and I was absolutely not today, so I apologize. So,
oh, don't sweat it, man. I enjoyed it.
People that want to interact with you, obviously, they're gonna find Social Animals. They're gonna hit that up. How else would you have them? You know, like if they want to like message you or you know follow you somewhere, how would you have them do that?
Yeah, so like I use Instagram to put up ads every week for the podcast. So Social Animals Podcast. If you want to send me an email, it's socialanimalspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to be on the show, you can, you know, tell me what you think of it or whatever. If you think you know someone who might have great stories, hit me up there. And socialanimals.ca is the website, and there's a contact form there. So feel free to come on that, and you can listen to the podcast there. You can subscribe on the website. You can find out about my friends who helped me build the show. So my wife built the website. My tattooist friend Jacqueline, she did the artwork. My friend Mike did the theme song, and my friend Soren does some other musical work as well. And you can find out everything you need to know, and hopefully I'll have some transcripts there eventually. But yeah, getting in touch, socialanimals.ca.
That's cool, man. I love all those shout outs. It sounds like it takes a village to raise a podcast.
Dude, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But I love them for everything they've done, and they're fantastic at what they do, those people. So yeah, use the website and you'll be giving credence to them for sure.
All right. Imagine that. A guy with a podcast about friends has some really good friends that he shouts out. Who would think?
That, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to hit stop, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me.